Welcome, my dear friend. Let everything slow. In the grim darkness of the far future, there are few fates worse than to be taken alive by the Drukhari. Tonight, we begin the story of the Dark Eldar, the sadistic raiders of the hidden city of Commorragh, a people who feed upon the suffering of others to save their own immortal souls. But to understand what they became, we must begin with what they were, and with the catastrophe they survived. Tonight we sit with the survivors of the fall, the Aeldari who fled into the dark and became the Drukhari. Tonight we sit with the survivors of the fall, the origins of the Dark Eldar, and the catastrophe from which they fled. The empire that fell. The Drukhari were born from the ruin of the ancient Aeldari Empire, the greatest civilization the galaxy had known, and the most decadent. Long before the age of the Imperium, the Aeldari ruled a vast empire across the stars, an ancient and mighty civilization, advanced beyond the understanding of the races that came after. For long ages they had known no rival, no threat, no equal, and in their security they turned to indulgence. With no enemies to fight and no dangers to face, the Aeldari sank into decadence, pursuing ever stranger and more extreme sensations, giving themselves over to pleasure and excess. Over the long ages, this decadence deepened into something darker. Cults of pleasure arose among the Aeldari, seeking ever more esoteric and extreme sensation, pushing the boundaries of experience past all restraint. What had begun as indulgence became obsession, the pursuit of sensation growing ever more depraved, the cults of pleasure sinking into cruelty and excess. The Aeldari Empire, mighty and ancient, rotted from within, its people given over to the pursuit of sensation without limit, its civilization decaying into decadence. And this decadence had a consequence the Aeldari did not foresee. The Aeldari were a psychic people, and their collective indulgence, their endless pursuit of sensation and excess, left its mark upon the warp, the realm of psychic energy that underlies reality. Over thousands of years, the depravity of the Aeldari gave shape to something in the warp, a growing presence born of their excess, feeding on their sensation, taking form from their depravity. Unknowing, the Aeldari were giving birth to a god, a chaos god born of their own decadence, growing in the warp toward a terrible awakening. It is worth understanding how complete the Aeldari decadence had become, for it was the engine of their doom. This was the descent of a whole civilization, more than the indulgence of a few. Across the Aeldari Empire, the cults of pleasure spread, drawing in ever more of the people, pushing ever further past the bounds of restraint. Sensation became the purpose of Aeldari life, and as ordinary pleasures palled, they sought stranger and crueler ones, until pain and death themselves became sources of pleasure, until depravity knew no limit. The whole civilization gave itself over to this pursuit, a mighty empire sinking into a depravity so total that it would birth a god of excess. And the Aeldari were warned. There were those among them who saw the danger, who understood where the path of decadence led, who tried to turn their people from the ruin ahead. But the warnings went unheeded. The Aeldari were too deep in their indulgence, too given over to sensation, too certain of their own security to heed those who cautioned them. The empire sank deeper into decadence, ignoring the warnings, pursuing sensation toward the catastrophe that awaited. This failure to heed the warnings would echo through the story of the Drukhari, who would go on ignoring such warnings even after the fall had proven them true. It is a pattern woven into the whole tragedy of the Aeldari, a people so certain of themselves, so given over to their own desires, that no warning could turn them from the path to ruin, not before the fall, and not after it. The birth of She Who Thirsts. The decadence of the Aeldari gave birth to a god, and its awakening destroyed them. The presence growing in the warp fed on the depravity of the Aeldari, growing stronger over thousands of years, taking shape and gathering power. And at last it awakened. Born from the collective excess of the Aeldari, a new chaos god sparked into being, a vast and malign intelligence with a bottomless thirst for Aeldari souls. This was Slaanesh, She Who Thirsts, the dark god born of Aeldari decadence, awakened into a terrible hunger for the very people who had created it. The awakening of Slaanesh was a catastrophe beyond imagining. As the god was born, it let out a psychic scream that tore through reality, and that scream annihilated the Aeldari. The birth of Slaanesh killed the vast majority of the Aeldari race in an instant, their souls consumed, their empire flayed to its bones, their civilization destroyed in a single cataclysm. Where the heart of the Aeldari Empire had been, a great wound was torn in reality, the Eye of Terror, a rift between the material world and the warp. The mightiest civilization the galaxy had known was destroyed by the god its own decadence had birthed. The scale of this catastrophe is difficult to grasp. In a single moment, an empire that had spanned the galaxy for ages beyond counting was destroyed, its people slain in their billions, their souls devoured by the god they had birthed. Whole worlds died in an instant, the psychic scream of Slaanesh's birth flaying the life from them. The Aeldari, who had been the masters of the galaxy, the mightiest and most advanced of all its peoples, were reduced in a single moment to a scattered remnant, their empire gone, their civilization destroyed, their god awakened and hungry. It was one of the greatest catastrophes in the history of the galaxy, the fall of an empire and the birth of a god in a single terrible instant, and the wound it left endures to this day. The Eye of Terror, torn in reality by the birth of Slaanesh, remains a great rift between the material world and the warp, a region where the demonic and the material bleed together, a scar upon the galaxy left by the fall of the Aeldari. 10,000 years and more after the catastrophe, in the age of the Imperium, the Eye of Terror still gapes where the Aeldari Empire once stood, a permanent monument to the decadence that destroyed a race and birthed a god. The fall was not merely an event in the distant past. It left a wound in reality that shapes the galaxy still, and a god that hungers still for every Aeldari soul. This was the fall of the Aeldari, the catastrophe that ended their empire and gave birth to She Who Thirsts. And it left the god Slaanesh with a claim upon every Aeldari soul. For Slaanesh had been born of the Aeldari, and it hungered for them still, its bottomless thirst reaching for every Aeldari soul, in life and in death. Any Aeldari who died would fall into the clutches of Slaanesh, their soul devoured, doomed to an eternity of torment in the grip of the god. The fall had not only destroyed the Aeldari Empire, it had cursed every Aeldari soul with the hunger of the god they had made. This curse is the heart of the whole Aeldari tragedy, and it shapes the story of every branch of the shattered race. Because Slaanesh had been born of Aeldari souls, it had a special hunger for them, a claim that reached beyond death. When an ordinary being dies, its soul passes into the warp, but when an Aeldari dies, its soul is drawn to Slaanesh, seized by the god that hungers for it, devoured and tormented for eternity. Death, for the Aeldari, became a doorway into the jaws of a waiting god. This is the doom that hangs over every Aeldari soul in the age that followed the fall. the reason the survivors of the catastrophe could never rest, never feel safe, never escape the god their decadence had made. For the survivors, this curse meant that the fall was only the beginning of their peril, far from the end. They had lived through the scream that annihilated their kin, but they had not escaped Slaanesh. The god still hungered for their souls, still waited to devour them in death, still reached for them across the veil. Every Aeldari who survived the fall carried this doom, the certain knowledge that when they died, their soul would fall into the clutches of the god their race had birthed. The survivors had escaped the immediate destruction, but the thirst of Slaanesh pursued them still, a doom that would shape everything they became. And nowhere would this doom be answered more terribly than in the hidden city of Commorragh, among the survivors who had embraced the darkness most of all. Those who fled into the dark. Not all the Aeldari perished in the fall. Some had fled, and among them were those who would become the Drukhari, though the fall destroyed the vast majority of the Aeldari. Some survived. Those who were far from the epicenter, or who had turned from the path of decadence, escaped the psychic scream that annihilated their kin. Some became the craft-world Aeldari, who fled on great ships and devoted themselves to discipline to escape the thirst of Slaanesh. Some became the Exodites, who fled to distant worlds. Some became other remnants of the shattered race. But there was one group of survivors darker than all the rest. The various survivors of the fall would go on to become the different branches of the shattered Aeldari race, each answering the doom of Slaanesh in its own way. The craft-world Aeldari, who fled on their great ship worlds, embraced a life of rigid discipline, guarding their souls against the thirst of Slaanesh through restraint and control, carrying spirit stones to capture their souls at death and keep them from the god. The Exodites fled to distant maiden worlds, living simpler lives far from the decadence that had doomed their race. Each of these branches survived by turning from the path that had caused the fall, choosing discipline or simplicity over the decadence that had birthed Slaanesh. But the survivors in Commorragh chose differently, and that difference is the whole of their story. Where the craft-world Aeldari and the Exodites turned from decadence, the survivors in the Dark City clung to it, refusing to change, refusing to repent, refusing to turn from the very path that had destroyed their race. They alone among the survivors chose to remain what they had been, to continue the depravity that had birthed Slaanesh, to answer the doom of the fall with more cruelty rather than less. This choice set them apart from all the other survivors, marked them as something darker, and began the long road that would make them the Drukhari, the Dark Eldar, the most cruel and depraved of all the branches of the shattered Aeldari race. These were the Aeldari, who had embraced the decadence most of all, the pleasure cults who had pushed their depravity furthest, and who had built for themselves private realms hidden within the Webway, the labyrinth of tunnels that the Aeldari used to travel the galaxy. Deep in the Webway, in a hidden city called Commorragh, these most depraved of the Aeldari had made their home. And when Slaanesh awakened and the scream annihilated their kin, these Aeldari, hidden within the Webway, survived. Sheltered in the folds of the labyrinth, far from the material world, the most decadent of all the Aeldari lived through the catastrophe their own kind had wrought. There is a bitter irony in this, that the most depraved of the Aeldari were among those who survived. The pleasure cults who had pushed their depravity furthest, who had done most to birth the god that destroyed their race, escaped the doom that took their more moderate kin. Hidden in Commorragh, in the depths of the Webway, they lived on, the most decadent of the Aeldari surviving the fall their decadence had caused. and they did not repent of what they were. Where their craft-world cousins turned to discipline and mourning, these survivors clung to their depravity, laughing still at the warnings of their somber kin. Consider the deep perversity of what these survivors chose. The fall had been caused by Aeldari decadence, by the cults of excess and depravity that had birthed Slaanesh. Any sane survivor might have turned from that path, might have embraced discipline and restraint as the craft-world Aeldari did, might have sought to atone for the catastrophe their decadence had wrought. But the survivors in Commorragh did the opposite. They looked upon the ruin their depravity had caused, and they leaned into it, diving deeper into the very cruelty and excess that had destroyed their race. Where their kin fled from decadence in horror, the Aeldari of Commorragh embraced it further, choosing depravity even in the shadow of the doom it had brought. This choice would define the Drukhari forever. They were the survivors who refused to learn, the Aeldari who looked upon the destruction of their race and chose to continue the very path that had caused it. Their craft-world cousins mourned, disciplined themselves, sought to avoid the thirst of Slaanesh through restraint. But the Aeldari of Commorragh chose cruelty, chose excess, chose to remain what they had always been, laughing at the warnings of their kin. They were the unrepentant survivors, the Aeldari who embraced the darkness even as it consumed their race, and in that choice lay the seed of everything the Drukhari would become. What became of these unrepentant survivors, and the terrible remedy they found for the thirst that still pursued them, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow, we sit with the thirst and the terrible remedy, the doom that pursued the Dark Eldar, and the horror by which they escaped it. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we sit with the thirst and the terrible remedy that made the Dark Eldar what they are. The survivors of the fall had escaped the scream that annihilated their kin, but they had not escaped Slaanesh. Hidden in Commorragh, they soon discovered that the god still hungered for their souls, still drew upon them slowly, still pursued them into the depths of the Webway. This was the thirst, the doom that pursued the Dark Eldar, and the remedy they found for it, the terrible answer that would define their whole civilization, is the horror we sit with tonight. Tonight we sit with the thirst and the terrible remedy that made the Dark Eldar what they are. Tonight we sit with the thirst and the terrible remedy, the doom that pursued the Dark Eldar, and the horror by which they answered it. The thirst. Hidden in the Webway, the survivors soon learned that they had not escaped the hunger of Slaanesh. The god drew upon their souls still. When the survivors fled into Commorragh, they hoped they had escaped the doom that had taken their kin. The Webway offered some shelter, some distance from the god, some protection from the hunger of Slaanesh. But the protection was not complete. To their horror, the survivors discovered that Slaanesh's grip upon them had weakened, but had not wholly broken. The god still had a claim upon their souls, still drew upon them, still hungered for them, even in the depths of the Webway. This was the thirst, the slow and terrible draining of their souls by Slaanesh. Even hidden in Commorragh, the Dark Eldar found their souls being drawn upon by the god, a slow consumption, a gnawing hunger that was the reaching of Slaanesh into their very being. It manifested as a hunger of their own, a gnawing need, the thirst, the felt pull of the god upon their souls. Slowly, over time, Slaanesh drew upon them, consuming their souls by degrees, a doom that pursued them even into the safest depths of the Dark City. And the thirst had a visible effect upon them. As Slaanesh drew upon their souls, the Dark Eldar began to diminish. They would shrivel, age, dim, their vitality drained, their beauty faded, their strength sapped, As the god consumed their souls by degrees, a Dark Eldar who did nothing to resist the thirst would slowly wither, diminished and drained by the god's slow consumption. The thirst was a doom written on their very bodies, the slow withering of those the god was consuming, the visible mark of Slaanesh's claim upon their souls. For a people who had once been beautiful beyond measure, proud and immortal in their ancient empire, this withering was a horror of a particular kind. The Aeldari had been a people of grace and beauty, long-lived and magnificent. And now the survivors in Commorragh faced a slow unmaking, a withering of that beauty and vitality, a shriveling under the endless draw of the god. To watch oneself diminish, to feel one's vitality drained away, to know that the god was slowly consuming one's very soul, was a doom that gnawed at every Dark Eldar, a constant terror lurking beneath their immortal existence. And the thirst was relentless. It never ceased, never rested, never released its hold. Every moment, Slaanesh drew upon the souls of the Dark Eldar, a constant slow consumption that could be held back but never ended. There was no cure for the thirst, no way to sever the god's claim, no escape from the slow draining of the soul. The Dark Eldar could resist it, could hold it back, but they could never be free of it. The thirst was a permanent doom, a hunger that pursued them every moment of their endless lives, the god forever reaching for the souls it had a claim upon. This was the doom the survivors faced in Commorragh, and against it they found their terrible remedy. It is worth holding this in mind through all that follows, for the thirst is the key to the Dark Eldar. Every cruelty they commit, every horror of their civilization, flows in the end from this single relentless doom. The terrible remedy. Against the thirst, the Dark Eldar discovered a remedy, and it was a horror that would define their whole civilization. Faced with the slow consumption of their souls, the Dark Eldar sought some way to resist the thirst, some means to hold back the hunger of Slaanesh. And they found one. They discovered that by absorbing the pain and suffering of another being, by drinking in the anguish of a tormented soul, they could replenish what Slaanesh had drained. The suffering of others could restore them, holding back the thirst, renewing the vitality the god had sapped. In the agony of others, the Dark Eldar found the remedy for their own doom. This discovery is the engine of the whole Drukhari civilization. By inflicting suffering upon others and drinking in their anguish, the Dark Eldar could rejuvenate themselves, restoring their vitality, their beauty, their strength, holding the thirst at bay. The pain of a tormented captive, absorbed by a Dark Eldar, would replenish the soul the god had drained, renewing the Dark Eldar and staving off the withering of the thirst. Suffering became their sustenance, the anguish of others the fuel that held back the hunger of Slaanesh. In the torment of captives, the Dark Eldar found their immortality. How this absorption works is a matter of the strange metaphysics of the warp and the soul. The Dark Eldar are psychic beings, like all Aeldari, and the suffering of others produces a psychic resonance, a wave of anguish and terror and despair that the Dark Eldar can drink in, can absorb into their own souls. When a captive suffers, when they scream in torment, the anguish of their soul radiates outward, and the Dark Eldar feed upon it, drawing that suffering into themselves to replenish what Slaanesh has drained. The more exquisite the suffering, the more prolonged the torment, the more the Dark Eldar can absorb, and so their torments are refined, drawn out, made as agonizing as possible, all to harvest the greatest measure of anguish from each victim. This is why the Dark Eldar are torturers rather than mere killers, artists of suffering. A quick death yields little. It is prolonged agony, exquisite torment, suffering drawn out to its utmost that feeds them best. And so they have made torment into an art, refining over the ages every technique for the infliction and prolonging of suffering, all in the service of the anguish they must harvest to live. The terrible remedy for the thirst made the Dark Eldar into connoisseurs of pain, masters of torment, artists whose medium is the suffering of others. Their whole dark craft, refined over uncounted ages, serves the harvest of the anguish that holds back their doom. For this was the promise of the remedy, that a Dark Eldar who fed regularly on the suffering of others need never die. So long as they had a steady supply of anguish to absorb, they could hold back the thirst forever, renewing themselves endlessly, becoming immortal in practice, immune to the passage of time. The Dark Eldar who fed on suffering could live forever, their souls replenished faster than Slaanesh could drain them, their vitality renewed with each fresh torment. Immortality was theirs, purchased with the suffering of others, the endless torment of captives holding back the hunger of the god. There is a terrible symmetry in this remedy worth pausing on. Slaanesh had been born of Aeldari excess, of the pursuit of sensation without limit, and now the survivors of the fall held back the god through the infliction of suffering, through the pursuit of others' anguish, through a cruelty that was itself a kind of sensation-seeking. The remedy for the doom their decadence had caused was more decadence, more cruelty, more depravity, the pursuit of suffering to hold back the god their pursuit of pleasure had made. In answering the thirst through torment, the Dark Eldar sank deeper into the very sensation-seeking that had doomed their race, their remedy a continuation of the sin that had caused their fall. And the remedy came at a terrible cost to others. For every Dark Eldar who held back the thirst, there were victims, captives, tormented beings whose anguish fed the immortality of their captors. The immortality of the Dark Eldar was purchased with the suffering of others, paid for in the screams of captives dragged from across the galaxy to be tormented in the depths of Commorragh. This is the foundation of the whole Drukhari civilization, a people who live forever by inflicting endless suffering on others, whose immortality is a perpetual harvest of anguish, whose survival demands a constant supply of victims to torment. The terrible remedy for the thirst made the Dark Eldar into an eternal engine of cruelty, feeding forever on the suffering of the galaxy. And so we can see, even at this early point in their story, the shape of what the Dark Eldar became. Doomed by the god their decadence had birthed, pursued forever by the thirst, they answered their doom with cruelty, holding back the god through the endless torment of others. Their immortality is real, but it is monstrous, an eternal life bought with an eternal harvest of suffering. Every age they endure is an age of anguish inflicted on countless victims, every century of their long lives paid for in the screams of the galaxy. This is the terrible remedy that made them, and everything they built in the dark city of Commorragh grew from it, a whole civilization raised upon the harvest of suffering. The sadism that is survival. For the Dark Eldar, cruelty is a necessity rather than a choice. Their sadism is the very mechanism of their survival. Here is the terrible truth at the heart of the Drukhari. Their cruelty is a metabolic necessity, more than a moral failing. They must inflict suffering, must drink in anguish, must torment others, or they will wither and die as Slaanesh consumes their souls. The sadism of the Dark Eldar is the mechanism of their survival, the means by which they hold back the thirst, the fuel that sustains their immortality. To stop feeding on suffering is to begin to die, to shrivel and dim as the god draws upon the soul. Their cruelty is survival itself. This is what makes the Drukhari so uniquely horrifying among the peoples of the galaxy. Other cruel beings are cruel by choice, by nature, by circumstance. But the Drukhari are cruel by necessity, their whole civilization built upon the infliction of suffering because suffering is what keeps them alive. Every torment they inflict, every captive they break, every anguish they drink in, is a Dark Eldar staving off their own death, feeding their immortality with the pain of others. Their sadism is not an indulgence they could set aside. It is the metabolic engine of their existence, the price of their immortality paid perpetually in the screams of others. And there is a further horror in this, a corruption that runs deeper still, because Slaanesh picks endlessly at their souls. Many Dark Eldar have developed a thirst for cruelty itself, beyond mere survival, a genuine appetite for the suffering of others, a delight in torment for its own sake. What began as a grim necessity became, for many, a pleasure, a craving, an addiction to the infliction of pain. The Dark Eldar torment others to survive, but many have come to love the tormenting, to revel in the anguish they cause, their metabolic need twisted into a bottomless appetite for cruelty. The remedy for the thirst became a thirst of its own, an endless craving for suffering that no amount of torment could ever wholly sate. This is the deepest damnation of the Drukhari, deeper even than the doom of Slaanesh. They began as survivors, driven to cruelty by necessity, forced to inflict suffering to hold back the god that consumed them. But over the long ages, that necessity became desire. The survival mechanism became an appetite. The grim remedy became a craving they pursued for its own sake. The Dark Eldar are no longer merely cruel to survive. They are cruel because they have come to love cruelty, their souls so corrupted by the god and by their own long practice of torment that suffering has become their joy as well as their sustenance. They feed on anguish to live and have come to live for the anguish they feed on. There is a grim logic to this that shapes everything about them. A people whose survival depends on inflicting suffering will build a civilization around the infliction of suffering, and so the Drukhari have. Their whole society, as we will see, is organized around the capture of victims, the harvesting of anguish, the perpetual supply of fresh torment to hold back the thirst. Their raids, their arenas, their fleshcraft, all of it serves the endless need for suffering that keeps them alive. The metabolic necessity of cruelty is written into every part of Drukhari civilization, a whole people organized around the terrible remedy for their doom. And there is one more consequence of the thirst worth marking, for it shapes how the Dark Eldar make war. They avoid the use of psychic powers, the very gifts their craft-world cousins wield with such skill. For to use psychic power is to shine brightly in the warp, to draw the gaze of Slaanesh, to risk the notice of the god that hungers for their souls. And so the Dark Eldar turn away from psychic power, relying instead on technology, on speed, on cruelty, on the physical means of war. Even in battle, the doom of Slaanesh shapes them, driving them away from the psychic gifts of their race and toward the cold technology and swift brutality that define their way of war. What became of a people built upon this terrible remedy and the dark city they raised in the Webway is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow we sit with the dark city of Commorragh, the hidden metropolis of the Dark Eldar. Sleep well. Tomorrow we sit with the dark city of Commorragh, the hidden metropolis where the Dark Eldar dwell. Deep within the Webway, hidden from the gaze of gods and the eyes of the galaxy, lies the dark city of Commorragh, the great home of the Dark Eldar. It is a city without sun or sky, a vast labyrinth of spires and arenas hidden in the folds of the labyrinth dimension, a metropolis so ancient and so immense that even its rulers cannot map its full extent, and it is, above all, a sanctuary, a place hidden from the very God that hungers for its people. Tonight we sit with the dark city of Commorragh, the hidden metropolis where the Dark Eldar dwell. Tonight we sit with the dark city of Commorragh, the hidden metropolis of the Dark Eldar, the city in the Webway. Commorragh lies hidden within the Webway, the labyrinth of tunnels the Aeldari built to travel the galaxy. To understand Commorragh, we must first understand the Webway. The Webway is a vast labyrinth of tunnels and passages that exist between the material world and the warp, a network the ancient Aeldari built to travel the galaxy without braving the dangers of the warp itself. It is a realm between realms, a dimension of countless passages and hidden pockets of space stretching across the galaxy, a labyrinth beyond mapping. Through the Webway, the Aeldari could travel vast distances in safety, moving through the passages between the stars. And deep within this labyrinth, the Dark Eldar built their city. Commorragh was raised in the folds of the Webway, in a hidden pocket of the labyrinth dimension, a great city-state built between the worlds. It grew over the ages into a vast metropolis, a sprawling city hidden in the depths of the Webway, far from the material world, hidden in the passages between the stars. This was the Dark City, the home of the Dark Eldar, a metropolis raised in the labyrinth where no outsider could easily find it. The location of Commorragh, hidden in the Webway, is the key to everything about it, because it lies within the labyrinth dimension between the material world and the warp. It is hidden from the galaxy, hard to find, hard to reach, a city that outsiders cannot easily locate. The craft world Aeldari, who also use the Webway, speak of Commorragh as a dark stain growing within their holy pathways, a corruption in the labyrinth they cannot easily reach or cleanse. Hidden in the Webway, Commorragh is a city apart, a metropolis in the labyrinth, hidden from the galaxy and safe from those who would destroy it. The Webway itself is one of the great wonders and mysteries of the galaxy, a legacy of the Aeldari at the height of their power. It is a network of passages that exist partly outside normal space and time, allowing travel across vast distances without braving the dangerous warp itself. Much of it has fallen into ruin or been lost in the ages since the fall, its passages broken, its gates sealed or forgotten. But great stretches of it endure, and within those enduring passages, hidden in a vast fold of the labyrinth, Commorragh has grown and thrived. The Dark City is a survivor of the old Aeldari glory, a piece of their ancient mastery turned to dark purpose, a metropolis raised in the wonder their ancestors built. That Commorragh lies outside the normal flow of time is part of what makes it so strange and so enduring. In the folds of the Webway, the ordinary passage of time holds little sway, and the Dark City exists in a kind of timelessness, ancient beyond measure, yet enduring still. This timelessness suits its immortal people. The Dark Eldar who, fed on suffering, do not age, dwelling in a city that itself stands outside the flow of time. Commorragh is a timeless city for a deathless people, an ancient metropolis in the labyrinth where neither the city nor its masters are subject to the ordinary passage of the ages. It has endured since before the fall, and it may endure until the end of the galaxy itself, a deathless city of deathless horrors hidden in the shadows between the worlds. The sanctuary from the god, the greatest secret of Commorragh, is that it hides the Dark Eldar from the gaze of Slaanesh, the god that hungers for their souls. We have seen that the Dark Eldar are pursued by the thirst, the slow consumption of their souls by Slaanesh. But in Commorragh, this doom is held further at bay, for the Dark City lies beyond the gaze of the god. Hidden in the shadow of the Webway, Commorragh is a place that Slaanesh cannot see, a sanctuary tucked away in the one place the god's gaze does not reach. The very location of the Dark City, deep in the labyrinth dimension, shelters it from the sight of the god that would devour its people. This is why the survivors of the fall fled into the Webway and raised their city there. When Slaanesh awakened and the scream annihilated their kin, the survivors saw that there was one way to escape the god, to flee the material world entirely, to hide in the labyrinth dimension where the god's gaze could not follow. They fled into the Webway, leaving the material world behind, and there they built Commorragh, a refuge hidden from the god in the shadows of the labyrinth. The Dark City was raised as a sanctuary, a hiding place from Slaanesh, a bastion built in the one place the god could not see. There is an image that captures this well. The Dark City is a sanctuary built in the blind spot of a hungry predator. Slaanesh hungers for the souls of the Dark Eldar, gazes for them across the galaxy, reaches for them in life and death. But in the shadow of the Webway, in the hidden folds of the labyrinth, the Dark Eldar have found the one place the god's gaze does not reach, and there they have built their home. They live within the blind spot of the very god that would devour them, sheltered from its sight in the shadows of the labyrinth, a whole civilization hidden in the one place their doom cannot see. And yet the sanctuary is not perfect, for the god's grip is weakened, but not wholly broken. Even in Commorragh, the thirst reaches the Dark Eldar, for Slaanesh still has a claim upon their souls that no distance can wholly sever. The Dark City shelters them from the god's gaze, weakens the god's hold, but does not free them from the thirst entirely. They are safer in Commorragh than anywhere else, hidden from the god's sight, but they are not free of the doom. The sanctuary buys them time and shelter, but the thirst pursues them even here. And so even in their hidden city, they must feed on suffering to survive. Commorragh is a refuge, but it is a refuge in the shadow of a doom that follows its people even into the dark. The vast metropolis. Commorragh is a city beyond imagining, a metropolis so vast and so ancient that even its rulers cannot map its full extent. The Dark City is no mere city as the material world knows cities. It is a metropolis of impossible scale, a sprawling labyrinth of spires and towers, arenas and palaces stitched together across countless sub-realms and pockets of the Webway. Its dimensions would seem impossible to any who tried to measure them, its population greater than that of whole star systems, its extent so vast that it is almost beyond mapping. Commorragh is a city to which the greatest cities of the material world are as anthills to a mountain, a metropolis of a scale the material world can barely imagine. And it is impossibly ancient. Commorragh has stood in the Webway since before the fall, growing over uncounted ages into the vast metropolis it is now. Over its long history, it has absorbed countless smaller realms, subsuming the vassal domains and satellite realms around it, growing ever larger, ever more sprawling, ever more labyrinthine. So vast and so ancient has it become that even those who rule it cannot know its full extent, cannot map its every district, cannot comprehend the whole of the city they command. The Dark City is a labyrinth beyond knowing, ancient and vast beyond the understanding even of its own masters. The city is layered from the heights of High Commorragh, where the noble Dark Eldar dwell in their spires and palaces, down through the districts and arenas to the depths of the underworld far below, where the darkest of the Dark Eldar practice their terrible crafts. It is a city of spires and drops, of gilded palaces and bottomless chasms, of arenas where blood is spilled, and flesh pits where horrors are made. Commorragh is a metropolis of every kind of horror, layered from its glittering heights to its terrible depths, a vast and ancient labyrinth of spires and shadows where the Dark Eldar dwell. High Commorragh, at the top of the city, is the domain of the noble Dark Eldar, the aristocrats and rulers of the Dark City. Here rise the great spires of the ruling powers, the palaces of the nobility, the arenas where the crowds gather to feast upon spectacle. It is a place of terrible beauty, gilded and magnificent, the glittering heights of a city built upon suffering. In High Commorragh dwell the mightiest of the Dark Eldar, the rulers and aristocrats who command the raids and hold the power, living in splendor atop the vast and terrible city. Far below, in the depths beneath the city, lies the underworld of Commorragh, a place of shadow and horror, even by the standards of the Dark City. Here in the depths dwell the darkest of the Dark Eldar, the flesh crafters and their horrors, working their terrible arts far from the glittering heights above. The underworld is a dangerous place even for the Dark Eldar, a realm of shadow and monsters and terrible crafts, the dark foundation beneath the gilded city, from the glittering spires of High Commorragh to the shadowed horrors of the underworld. The Dark City spans every kind of darkness, a vast metropolis layered from splendor to horror. It is a city that mirrors the Dark Eldar themselves, beautiful and terrible at once, gilded splendor raised upon a foundation of suffering, a magnificence that rests upon endless cruelty. The Watchtower over the galaxy. From their hidden city, the Dark Eldar watch the whole galaxy, choosing their prey through 10,000 secret portals. Though Commorragh is hidden in the Webway, it is not cut off from the galaxy. Quite the opposite. From the Dark City, the Dark Eldar can reach out to anywhere in the material world, for the Webway connects to countless points across the galaxy, and Commorragh commands a vast number of these gateways. Through 10,000 secret portals, the Dark Eldar watch the galaxy, observing the material world, choosing their prey, waiting for the moment to strike. The Dark City is a watchtower over the whole galaxy, its people gazing out through countless hidden gates at the worlds they will raid. This is what makes Commorragh so terrible a threat. Hidden and safe in the Webway, the Dark Eldar can watch the galaxy at their leisure, choosing their targets, planning their raids, and then striking out through the portals to fall upon the material world. They can appear anywhere, raid any world, and then vanish back into the Webway with their captives, retreating to their hidden city where none can follow. The 10,000 portals make the Dark Eldar a threat to the whole galaxy, a hidden predator that can strike anywhere and vanish without trace. The horror of this, for the peoples of the galaxy, is that there is almost no defense against it. A world may be strong, well defended, ready for any conventional attack. But the Dark Eldar do not come by conventional means. They emerge from a portal without warning, fall upon their victims with terrible speed, seize their captives, and vanish back into the Webway before any real defense can be mounted. There is no fleet to intercept, no border to guard, no warning of their coming. They appear from nowhere, strike, and are gone, leaving only the missing and the dead. Against a foe that strikes from the hidden paths of the Webway, the ordinary defenses of the galaxy are of little use, and the Dark Eldar choose their prey with terrible care. From their watchtower over the galaxy, They observe the material world, selecting the victims who will best serve their needs, whether for the harvest of suffering, the slave markets of the city, or the spectacle of the arenas. They can afford to be patient, to choose the perfect moment, to select the richest prize, for they strike at their leisure from their hidden city, in no danger themselves. The galaxy is their hunting ground, watched through 10,000 portals, and the Dark Eldar are the hidden predators who choose their prey at leisure and strike without warning from the shadows of the Webway. To the peoples of the material world, the Dark Eldar are a nightmare that can come at any time, and against which there is little guard. Raiders who appear from nowhere, take the living for a fate worse than death, and vanish back into the labyrinth without a trace. And so Commorragh is at once fortress, marketplace, and theatre of torment. It is a fortress, hidden and safe in the Webway, beyond the reach of those who would destroy it. It is a marketplace, where the captives and plunder of 1,000 raids are bought and sold, where slaves are traded and treasures exchanged. And it is a theatre of torment, where the anguish of captives feeds the immortality of the Dark Eldar, where the arenas roar and the flesh pits work their horrors. The Dark City is all of these at once, a hidden bastion from which the Dark Eldar watch the galaxy, raid the material world, and harvest the suffering that holds back their doom. What became of the Dark Eldar who dwell in this city, and the society they built within it, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow we sit with the Kabals, the ruling powers of Commorragh. Sleep well. Tomorrow we sit with the Kabals, the ruling powers of the Dark City, and the raiders who harvest the galaxy. At the summit of Dark Eldar society stand the Kabals, the great power blocks that rule the Dark City of Commorragh. They are armed dynasties, aristocracies of warriors and schemers, each led by a ruthless Archon who has clawed his way to power through murder and betrayal. It is the Kabals who send their raiders out into the galaxy to harvest the slaves and plunder that sustain the Dark City. And it is the Kabals who scheme endlessly against one another in the shadowed halls of Commorragh. Tonight we sit with the Kabals, the ruling powers of the Dark City, and the raiders who harvest the galaxy. Tonight we sit with the Kabals, the ruling powers of Commorragh, and the raiders who harvest the galaxy. The ruling powers. The Kabals are the political and military power blocks that rule Commorragh, armed dynasties of warriors and aristocrats. At the top of Dark Eldar society stand the Kabals, the great power blocks that hold sway over the Dark City. A Kabal is an armed dynasty, an aristocracy of warriors and intriguers, a power block that commands soldiers and fleets and vast wealth in slaves. The Kabals are the true rulers of Commorragh, the powers that dominate the Dark City, holding their territories and their wealth through force and cunning. To be a great Kabal is to hold power in Commorragh, to command warriors and raiders, to dominate the Dark City through strength and terror. Each Kabal is bound together by oaths of loyalty, but these oaths are only as strong as fear can make them. Among the Dark Eldar, loyalty is a matter of self-interest and terror, not of honor or affection. A Kabalite serves his Kabal because it is in his interest to do so, because he fears the consequences of betrayal, because the Kabal offers him power and protection. But should his interest change, should he see a chance for advancement, the oaths mean little. The Kabals are bound by fear and self-interest, their loyalty a matter of calculation, their unity held together by terror rather than trust. And the Kabals command great power. Each holds its territory in Commorragh, commands its warriors and its fleets, controls its share of the wealth and slaves that flow through the Dark City. The great Kabals can field armies, launch raids across the galaxy, and dominate whole swathes of Commorragh. They are the powers that matter in the Dark City, the armed dynasties whose strength and wealth make them the rulers of the Dark Eldar. To hold a great Kabal is to hold real power in Commorragh, the power of warriors and fleets, and the wealth of 1,000 raids. The mightiest of all the Kabals is the Kabal of the Black Heart, whose dominance over the Dark City has endured longer than the memory of many lesser empires. The Black Heart is the greatest of the Kabals, its power unmatched, its Archon the de facto overlord of all Commorragh. For long ages it has held the summit of Dark Eldar power, dominating the Dark City, outlasting its rivals, holding the supreme place among the Kabals. The Black Heart is the ruling Kabal of Commorragh, the greatest of the armed dynasties, its long dominance a testament to the cunning and ruthlessness of its Archon. Beneath and around the great Kabals are countless lesser ones, from mighty dynasties to petty bands of thugs, all vying for power, all scheming against one another, all seeking a greater share of the wealth and slaves of the Dark City. Dark Eldar society is anarchic and treacherous, power constantly shifting among the Kabals as they rise and fall, scheme and betray, war and ally and war again. There is no stable order, no fixed hierarchy beyond the dominance of the Black Heart, only the endless shifting of power among the Kabals, each striving to rise, each guarding against the schemes of the rest. The Kabals are the ruling powers of a city without order, armed dynasties locked in an endless struggle for the wealth and power of the Dark City. The mightiest of all the Kabals is the Kabal of the Black Heart, whose dominance over the Dark City has endured longer than the memory of many lesser empires. The Black Heart is the greatest of the Kabals, its power unmatched, its Archon the de facto overlord of all Commorragh. For long ages it has held the summit of Dark Eldar power, dominating the Dark City, outlasting its rivals, holding the supreme place among the Kabals. The Black Heart is the ruling Kabal of Commorragh, the greatest of the armed dynasties, its long dominance a testament to the cunning and ruthlessness of its Archon. Beneath and around the great Kabals are countless lesser ones, from mighty dynasties to petty bands of thugs, all vying for power, all scheming against one another, all seeking a greater share of the wealth and slaves of the Dark City. Dark Eldar society is anarchic and treacherous, power constantly shifting among the Kabals as they rise and fall, scheme and betray, war and ally and war again. There is no stable order, no fixed hierarchy beyond the dominance of the Black Heart, only the endless shifting of power among the Kabals, each striving to rise, each guarding against the schemes of the rest. The Kabals are the ruling powers of a city without order, armed dynasties locked in an endless struggle for the wealth and power of the Dark City. The Archons. Each Kabal is ruled by an Archon, a ruthless lord who has clawed his way to power through murder, blackmail and betrayal. At the head of each Kabal stands its Archon, the lord who commands it. But an Archon does not inherit his position by right, nor hold it by law. He claws his way to the top through a relentless calculus of murder, blackmail and betrayal, and he holds his place only so long as he can defend it against all who would take it from him. To become an Archon is to out-scheme and out-murder every rival, to climb over the corpses of those who stood in the way, to seize power through cunning and cruelty, and to remain an Archon is to defend that power forever against the endless schemes of those below. For an Archon is never safe. Beneath him, his own Kabalite scheme for his position, waiting for a moment of weakness, plotting his downfall. Around him, rival Archons plot against him, seeking to destroy his Kabal and seize his power. An Archon walks forever among knives, surrounded by those who would murder him for his position, forced to defend his power through constant vigilance and constant cruelty. To rise within a cabal is to walk forever among knives, and to rule one is to walk among them still, the Archon never safe from the schemes of rivals and underlings alike. This is why the Archons are so ruthless, so cunning, so cruel. Only the most ruthless can seize power in Commorragh, and only the most cunning can hold it. An Archon who showed weakness, who hesitated to murder a rival, who failed to see a scheme against him, would not last long. The endless treachery of Dark Eldar society ensures that only the most capable and cruel rise to rule the Kabals, the Archons who have proven themselves able to scheme and murder their way to the top, and to defend their power against all comers. The Archons are the survivors of an endless war of treachery, the cruelest and most cunning of a cruel and cunning people. To guard themselves against the endless threat of assassination, the Archons surround themselves with protection, and the most fearsome of their guards are the Incubi. The Incubi are elite warriors, masters of the blade, who serve as bodyguards to the Archons and other powerful Dark Eldar. What makes them so valued is that they hail from shrines unaffiliated with any Kabal, and so they have no stake in the endless schemes of the Kabal they guard. An incubus guards his charge faithfully because he is bound by the codes of his shrine, not tempted by the position of the one he protects. For an Archon surrounded by underlings who covet his power, a guard with no interest in that power is a precious thing, and so the Incubi are prized as the most trustworthy protectors in a city where trust is otherwise unknown. Even so, an Archon can never relax his guard. The Haemonculi, the fleshcrafters of the deep city, offer another kind of protection, resurrection. An Archon who can pay the terrible price can arrange to be restored to life should he be assassinated, brought back from death by the arts of the fleshcrafters, cheating even the knives of his rivals. And so the greatest Archons guard themselves with Incubi against assassination, and with Haemonculi against death itself, surrounding themselves with every protection a paranoid and murderous society can devise. To rule a Kabal is to live in perpetual danger, and the Archons meet that danger with perpetual vigilance, guarding their power and their lives against the endless schemes of a treacherous people. The Realspace raids. The Kabal sustain the Dark City through the Realspace raids, striking out into the galaxy to harvest slaves and plunder. The Kabals are the primary raiders of the Dark Eldar, striking out from Commorragh into the material world to seize the captives and plunder that sustain the Dark City. Through the 10,000 portals of the Webway, the Kabals send their warriors into Realspace, falling upon the worlds of the galaxy to seize slaves for the markets and the arenas, captives for the harvest of suffering, and plunder to enrich the Kabal. The Realspace raids are the lifeblood of the Dark City, the means by which the Kabals gather the slaves and wealth that sustain their power and their people. For the Dark Eldar, the raids are more than a means of gathering slaves and wealth. They are a necessity of survival. Every captive dragged back to Commorragh is a fresh source of the suffering the Dark Eldar must harvest to hold back the thirst. Without the raids, without the constant supply of captives, the Dark Eldar would have no anguish to feed upon, and the thirst would consume them. And so the raids never cease, the Kabals striking out endlessly into the galaxy, seizing captives without number to feed the endless need of the Dark City. The raids are the mechanism that sustains the whole Dark Eldar civilization, the harvest that keeps the thirst at bay and the Dark City alive. The Realspace raids also serve the ambitions of the Kabals and their Archons. A successful raid brings wealth, slaves, and glory to the Kabal that launches it. strengthening its position in the endless struggle for power within Commorragh. An Archon who leads great raids, who returns laden with captives and plunder, grows in power and prestige, his Kabal enriched, his position strengthened. And so, the raids serve both the survival of the Dark Eldar and the ambitions of their rulers, the Kabals striking out into the galaxy to feed the thirst and to feed their own power alike. The harvest of the galaxy is the foundation of the Dark City, sustaining its people and enriching its rulers, the endless raiding that keeps Commorragh alive. The Dark Eldar way of raiding is defined by shock, speed, and terror. They do not wage long campaigns or wars of attrition. They strike swiftly, fall upon their targets with sudden violence, seize their captives, and vanish back into the Webway before any defense can be mounted. Their aim is usually to scatter the enemy and seize slaves, and so many of their weapons are designed to maim and incapacitate rather than to kill, for a living captive is worth far more to the Dark Eldar than a dead one. The Realspace raid is a thing of terrible speed and precision, a sudden strike to seize the living and vanish with them into the dark. And the warriors who carry out these raids are the Kabalite warriors, the soldiers of the Kabals. The Kabalites are swift and deadly fighters, armed with splinter weapons that fire poison shards, striking from their swift vehicles with sudden violence. They are the backbone of the Kabal strength, the warriors who fill the raiding parties, the soldiers who fall upon the worlds of the galaxy to seize slaves and plunder. Only the most capable are chosen for the raids, and so the Kabalite warriors are terrifying opponents, swift and deadly and utterly without mercy, the raiders who harvest the galaxy for the Dark City. The vehicles of the Dark Eldar are a marvel of their dark craft, and central to their way of raiding. Swift anti-gravity craft, the raiders and venoms and ravagers skim across the battlefield at incredible speed, carrying the raiders into battle and away again before the enemy can respond. The Dark Eldar are among the most technologically advanced peoples in the galaxy, their mastery of anti-gravity and dark technology surpassing even their craft-world cousins, and their raiding craft embody this mastery. Swift, deadly, and elegant, the vehicles of the Dark Eldar carry the raiders through the portals, across the battlefield, and back into the Webway, the instruments of the lightning raids that sustain the Dark City. There is a particular horror in the purpose of these raids, for the captives they seize face a fate worse than death. Those taken in the Realspace raids are dragged back to Commorragh, into the markets and the arenas and the flesh pits, to serve as slaves, as fodder for the spectacles, and as fuel for the harvest of suffering. To be taken alive by the Dark Eldar is to be doomed to torment, to become raw material for the terrible needs of the Dark City. This is why, in the grim galaxy of the far future, there are few fates more dreaded than to be captured by the Drukhari, for the raiders come to take rather than to kill, and what awaits their captives in the Dark City is a horror beyond the mercy of a clean death. What became of the other powers of Commorragh, the gladiators of the arenas, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow we sit with the Wych Cults, the arena fighters of the Dark City. Sleep well. Tomorrow we sit with the Wych Cults, the gladiators of Commorragh, and the spectacle of the arenas. If the Kabals are the raiders of the Dark City, the Wych Cults are its gladiators. In the great arenas of Commorragh, the witches fight and kill for the pleasure of the crowds, their deadly artistry a spectacle that feeds the Dark Eldar as surely as any raid. They are warriors of terrible skill and grace, dancers with blades led by the deadly succubi, who reign as the queens of the arena. Tonight we sit with the Wych Cults, the gladiators of Commorragh, and the spectacle of the arenas. Tonight we sit with the Wych Cults, the gladiators of Commorragh, and the spectacle of the arenas. The gladiators of the Dark City. The Wych Cults are the gladiatorial organizations of Commorragh, whose warriors fight and kill in the great arenas for the pleasure of the crowds. Alongside the Kabals, the other great power of Commorragh is the Wych Cults, the gladiatorial organizations of the Dark City. Where the Kabals are the raiders and rulers, the Wych Cults are the arena fighters, the gladiators whose deadly performances are the great spectacle of Commorragh. The witches are warriors of terrible skill, fighting and killing in the great arenas of the Dark City, their battles a spectacle for the crowds who gather to watch. The Wych Cults are the masters of the arena, the gladiators whose artistry of death entertains the Dark Eldar. In the division of the Dark City, they stand as the counterpart to the Kabals, the two great powers that between them define the Dark Eldar way of war. The Kabals with their guns and their raids, the Wych Cults with their blades and their arenas. And the witches are, for the most part, female warriors, the elite fighters of the Dark City. They are acrobatic combatants, fighting with blades and grace, dancing through their battles with a deadly artistry. Their combat is a thing of speed and skill, a lethal dance in the arena, the witches leaping and spinning and striking with a grace that makes their killing a kind of terrible art. The Wych Cults are famed for this artistry, their warriors the most graceful and deadly of all the Dark Eldar, dancers with blades whose every movement is death. The witches wear little armor, relying instead on their skill and their speed to survive. Where other warriors trust in armor, the witches trust in their own agility, dodging blows they could not withstand, evading strikes through sheer skill and grace. This makes their fighting all the more spectacular, all the more a display of pure skill, the witches surviving through artistry rather than armor, their battles a dance of evasion and lethal precision. To watch a witch fight is to watch a master of the deadly arts, a warrior who survives by grace alone, a dancer whose every step evades death and deals it. To aid them in their deadly art, the witches make use of combat drugs, potent stimulants that heighten their speed, their reflexes, their strength and endurance, beyond even the natural gifts of their race. These combat drugs, injected before battle, turn the witches into weapons of terrible speed and lethality, their movements quickened beyond the eye, their reflexes sharpened to perfection. A witch, under the influence of her combat drugs, is a blur of lethal motion, faster and deadlier than any ordinary warrior, her every sense heightened, her every movement precise. The combat drugs are part of the witch's deadly craft, the chemical edge that makes her dance of blades so swift and so lethal. And the witches fight with a great array of exotic weapons, the tools of their deadly trade. Blades of every kind, whips and nets and hooks, weapons designed to wound and disable and display, all wielded with the grace and skill that mark the witch's art. Their weapons are chosen for spectacle as much as for lethality, tools that let the witch stage a beautiful and terrible performance, a dance of blades that thrills the crowd and deals death with grace. The witches are artists of the arena, their bodies and their weapons, the instruments of a deadly performance, their every battle a display of the lethal grace that makes them the celebrated gladiators of the Dark City. The spectacle that feeds. The battles of the arena are more than entertainment. The spectacle of suffering and death feeds the Dark Eldar as surely as any raid. The arenas of Commorragh are the great theatres of the Dark City, where the witches fight and kill before vast crowds of Dark Eldar. But these spectacles are more than mere entertainment. Recall that the Dark Eldar feed upon suffering, drinking in the anguish of others to hold back the thirst. And the arena is a great engine of suffering, a place where death and anguish are staged for the crowds, where the Dark Eldar gather to drink in the suffering of the arena as much as to watch the skill of the witches. For the crowds who watch the arena battles feed upon the spectacle, absorbing the anguish and terror and death staged before them. The suffering of those who die in the arena, the fear and pain of the combatants and the victims, radiates outward, and the watching Dark Eldar drink it in, replenishing themselves, holding back the thirst. The arena is thus a great communal feast of suffering, a spectacle that feeds the whole watching crowd, the anguish of the arena sustaining the Dark Eldar who gather to watch. The battles of the Witches are entertainment and sustenance at once, a spectacle of death that feeds the crowds who watch it. This is why the witch cults are so central to the Dark City. They provide survival as well as entertainment, staging the spectacles of suffering that feed the population of Commorragh. Where the Kabals gather captives through the raids, the witch cults transform suffering into spectacle, staging the arena battles that let the crowds feed. Between them, the Kabals and the witch cults sustain the Dark City, the one harvesting captives from the galaxy, the other staging the spectacles that turn suffering into sustenance for the crowds. The arena is a pillar of the Dark Eldar way of life, the spectacle of death that feeds the deathless people of Commorragh. There is a grim efficiency to this arrangement, a dark logic that shapes the whole Dark City. The Dark Eldar need suffering to survive, and the arena provides it in vast measure, staging the deaths of countless captives and combatants for the feeding of the crowds. A single great spectacle in the arena can feed thousands of Dark Eldar at once, the massed anguish of the arena radiating out to the watching multitude. And so, the arenas are always busy, the spectacles always staged, the suffering always flowing, a constant harvest of anguish to feed the deathless crowds. The witch cults have made an industry of suffering, an entertainment that is also a feeding, a spectacle that sustains the whole population of the Dark City, and there is a terrible artistry to it as well. The witches do not merely kill, they kill beautifully, spectacularly, drawing out their battles into displays of grace and skill and death that thrill the crowds and maximize the suffering harvested. A skilled witch can make of a killing a work of art, a performance that delights the crowd and feeds them richly. The death of a victim staged for the greatest possible spectacle and the greatest possible harvest. The arena is a place where cruelty becomes art, where suffering is staged for beauty as much as for sustenance, where the deadly grace of the witches turns killing into a spectacle that feeds the deathless people of Commorragh. The succubi. The witch cults are led by the succubi, the supreme gladiators who reign as the queens of the arena. At the head of each witch cult stands its succubus, the greatest gladiator of the cult, the queen of the arena. A succubus has risen to her position through unmatched skill in the arena, proving herself the deadliest and most graceful of all the witches, the supreme fighter of her cult. She reigns as a celebrity and a queen, adored and feared, the star of the arena and the leader of her cult. The succubi are the champions of the Dark City, the greatest gladiators, the queens whose skill in the arena has raised them to rule the witch cults. A succubus is a warrior of terrible skill, the deadliest of the deadly, a fighter whose grace and lethality surpass all others. She has survived countless battles in the arena, killed countless foes, proven herself again and again as the supreme fighter of her cult, and she reigns upon that skill, her position resting on her prowess. her rule maintained by her unmatched ability in the arena. To challenge a succubus is to face the deadliest warrior of the witch cult, a fighter who has proven herself against all comers, the queen of the arena whose skill has never been surpassed. Yet a succubus rules by more than skill alone. Like the archons of the Kabals, she must guard her position against rivals and ambitious underlings. For in the witch cults, as everywhere in Commorragh, power is held only so long as it can be defended. A succubus who showed weakness, who lost her edge in the arena, who failed to see a challenge coming, would soon be replaced by a hungrier rival. And so, the succubi are as watchful and ruthless as any archon, guarding their supremacy through skill and cunning and cruelty, defending their position against the endless ambition of those below. To reign as a succubus is to reign in perpetual danger, the queen of the arena forever guarding her crown against those who would take it. Like the archons of the Kabals, the succubi are figures of pride and vanity and ambition, reveling in their fame, jealous of their position, ruthless in defense of their supremacy. They are celebrities of the Dark City, adored by the crowds, envied by their rivals, the stars of the great spectacle of the arena. And they are as cruel and ambitious as any Dark Eldar, using their fame and their skill to gain power and pleasure, reigning as the queens of the arena and the leaders of the witch cults. The succubi are the deadly queens of Commorragh, the supreme gladiators whose skill and fame make them among the most celebrated of all the Dark Eldar. The Reavers and the Riders. Beyond the arena, the witch cults take to the skies, their Reaver gangs racing and killing in displays of reckless daring. The witch cults are not confined to the arena floor. Among them are the Reavers, the jet bike gangs of the Dark City, who take to the skies on swift anti-gravity bikes to race and fight and display their reckless daring. The Reavers are thrill seekers and daredevils, racing their jet bikes at breakneck speed, performing feats of aerial daring, staging the death races and sky battles that are another great spectacle of the Dark City. They are the riders of the witch cults, the daredevils whose aerial displays thrill the crowds of Commorragh. The death races of the Reavers are spectacles of speed and danger, the riders hurtling through the air at terrible speed, risking death for the thrill and the glory and the pleasure of the crowds. To ride with the Reavers is to court death at every moment, to race and fight in the skies where a single mistake means destruction. The Reavers embrace this danger, reveling in the thrill of speed and risk, their death races a display of the reckless daring that the Dark Eldar prize. They are the Sky Riders of Commorragh, the daredevils whose races and battles are another spectacle of the Dark City. And like the arena battles, the displays of the Reavers feed the crowds who watch them. The danger and death of the death races, the thrill and terror of the aerial battles, provide another source of the spectacle suffering that sustains the Dark Eldar. Between the witches in the arena and the Reavers in the skies, the witch cults stage a constant spectacle of skill and danger and death, feeding the crowds of Commorragh with the suffering and thrill of their performances. The witch cults are the entertainers and the sustainers of the Dark City, their spectacles of blade and speed and death, a pillar of the Dark Eldar way of life. There is something worth noting in the recklessness of the Reavers, for it reveals a truth about the Dark Eldar, a people who cannot die of age, who are sustained forever by the suffering of others, might be expected to guard their immortal lives with care. But the Reavers do the opposite, courting death at every moment, risking their deathless existence for the thrill of speed and danger. This is because immortality, for the Dark Eldar has become a kind of curse of boredom, an endless existence that dulls every pleasure and demands ever greater extremes to feel anything at all. The Reavers risk their immortal lives for the thrill, because only such extremes can pierce the numbness of their endless existence. Only the nearness of death can make them feel alive. This is a thread that runs through the whole Dark Eldar character, and the Reavers show it in its sharpest form. Their immortality, bought with the suffering of others, has become an endless and jaded thing, a deathless existence in which ordinary pleasures have long since palled. And so they seek ever greater extremes, ever crueler pleasures, ever more dangerous thrills, chasing the sensation that their endless lives have dulled. The Reavers, racing toward death for the thrill of it, embody this restless hunger, the jaded immortals seeking in danger and speed the feeling their endless existence has drained away. Even the spectacle of the skies, then, is shaped by the deep curse of the Dark Eldar, the endless hunger of a people who have everything and feel nothing. What became of the darkest power of Commorragh, the masters of flesh who dwell in the depths, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow, we sit with the Haemonculi, the flesh crafters of the Dark City. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we sit with the Haemonculi, the flesh crafters of Commorragh, and the masters of pain and resurrection. In the deepest depths of Commorragh dwell the oldest and most terrible power of the Dark City, the Haemonculi, the master flesh crafters of the Dark Eldar. They are artists of anatomy and pain, sculptors of flesh, ancient beyond measure, and they hold a secret that every Dark Eldar needs, the power to raise the dead. Tonight we sit with the Haemonculi, the flesh crafters of Commorragh, and the masters of pain and resurrection. Tonight we sit with the Haemonculi, the flesh crafters of Commorragh, and the masters of pain and resurrection. The masters of flesh. The Haemonculi are the master flesh crafters of the Dark Eldar, artists of anatomy and pain who dwell in the depths of Commorragh. Deep beneath the Dark City, in the shadowed underworld far below the glittering spires, dwell the Haemonculi, the flesh crafters of the Dark Eldar. They are the masters of anatomy, the sculptors of flesh, the artists whose medium is the living body and whose craft is the infliction and the study of pain. Over uncounted ages, the Haemonculi have perfected their terrible arts, mastering the workings of the body, the science of suffering, the sculpting of flesh into any form they desire. They are the deepest experts in pain and anatomy in all the galaxy, the master flesh crafters of the Dark City. The craft of the Haemonculi is a thing of horror beyond imagining. They can reshape the living body into any form, sculpting flesh, adding limbs, remaking bodies, creating horrors from the raw material of the living. They understand pain as no others do, able to prolong suffering, to keep a victim alive and in agony far beyond what any body should endure, to make an art and a science of torment. The Haemonculi are the ultimate torturers, the masters of a craft refined over ages, able to work horrors upon the flesh that lesser cruelties cannot imagine. Their laboratories in the depths of Commorragh are places of terrible creation, where flesh is sculpted and pain is perfected. And the Haemonculi have worked their craft upon themselves as much as upon their victims. Over their long lives, they have remade their own bodies, adding limbs, sculpting their forms into grotesque and terrible shapes, becoming horrors of their own making. Many float above the ground, their bodies remade beyond the need to walk, their forms sculpted into shapes that reflect their terrible arts. The Haemonculi are grotesque and ancient beings, their own bodies the canvas of their craft, remade over ages into forms that mark them as the masters of flesh. To look upon a homunculus is to see the flesh craft of the Dark City made manifest, a being who has sculpted itself into a horror. There is a purpose to this self-modification beyond mere display. The Haemonculi remake their bodies to extend their lives, to enhance their abilities, to embody their mastery of flesh. A homunculus may add tools and weapons to its own body, may sculpt itself for greater endurance or greater capability, may remake its form over ages into an ever more capable instrument of its craft. Their grotesque bodies are the working out of their art upon themselves, more than mere vanity, each modification serving some purpose of longevity or power or craft. The Haemonculi have made themselves into living embodiments of their art, their bodies sculpted over ages into forms that serve their terrible work, and their craft extends to the creation of new horrors from the flesh of others. In their laboratories in the depths, the Haemonculi work upon the captives and slaves brought to them, remaking them into new forms, creating servants and weapons and horrors from the raw material of the living. A captive dragged into the depths of Commorragh may be remade into something else entirely, sculpted by the Haemonculi into a servant of the covens, a horror for the arena, a weapon for the battlefield. The fleshcraft of the Haemonculi turns the living into raw material, remaking captives into the horrors that serve the Dark City, the masters of flesh sculpting new terrors from the bodies of the doomed. The power to raise the dead. The greatest power of the Haemonculi is the power to raise the dead, and it is the secret by which the Dark Eldar cheat true death. For all their mastery of pain and flesh, the greatest power of the Haemonculi is this: they can raise the dead. From a scrap of flesh, a fragment of the body, a pattern of the self, a homunculus can regrow a slain Dark Eldar, restoring them to life, bringing them back from death itself. This is the deepest and most valued of the Haemonculi's arts, the power to resurrect the fallen, to bring back the dead, to cheat the death that would otherwise claim even the immortal Dark Eldar. This power is of immense importance to the Dark Eldar, for it is how they cheat true death. We have seen that the Dark Eldar are immortal in the sense that they do not age, holding back the thirst by feeding on suffering, but they can still be killed, slain in battle or murdered by a rival. And a slain Dark Eldar faces the true death, the devouring of their soul by Slaanesh. The Haemonculi offer an escape from this fate. So long as a homunculus holds a Dark Eldar's pattern, that Dark Eldar can be regrown after death, restored to life, saved from the jaws of the god. Through the Haemonculi, the Dark Eldar can cheat even death itself. But this resurrection comes at a price, for the Haemonculi do nothing without payment. To secure the promise of resurrection, a Dark Eldar must pay the Haemonculi, must earn their favor, must offer them what they desire, whether wealth or service or victims for their craft. And the Haemonculi drive hard bargains, for they hold a power that every Dark Eldar covets, the power to escape true death. This gives the Haemonculi immense leverage over the whole of Dark Eldar society, for even the mightiest Archon may need the fleshcrafter's art to escape the death of a rival's blade. The power to raise the dead makes the Haemonculi a power that all must reckon with, the keepers of the secret of true immortality, and the resurrection they offer is never quite a simple restoration. A Dark Eldar brought back by the Haemonculi is remade from a pattern, regrown from a fragment, and the Haemonculi may make changes in the remaking, adding their own touches, exacting subtle prices in the flesh of those they restore. To be resurrected by the Haemonculi is to place oneself in their hands, to trust the fleshcrafters with one's very being, to accept whatever they choose to make of the body they regrow. And the Haemonculi, being what they are, do not always resist the temptation to leave their mark, to remake the resurrected in some small or large way, to exact their art upon those who owe them their lives. Resurrection is a gift, but it is a gift with a price, offered by beings whose every act is touched by cruelty and craft. There is a grim irony in the Dark Eldar dependence on the Haemonculi. The Dark Eldar prize their independence, their power, their freedom from all constraint. And yet every one of them, from the lowliest Kabalite to the mightiest Archon, depends upon the Haemonculi to escape true death. The Fleshcrafters hold the ultimate leverage over the whole proud and treacherous society of Commorragh, for all of them, in the end, need the Haemonculi's art to cheat the god that hungers for their souls. The masters of flesh, dwelling quietly in the depths, hold a power over the dark city that even the greatest Archon cannot match, the power of true immortality that all the Dark Eldar covet, and only the Haemonculi can give. The Covens. The Haemonculi band together into Covens, the third great power of Commorragh, alongside the Kabals and the Wych Cults. Like the Kabals and the Wych Cults, the Haemonculi form power blocks of their own, the Covens. A coven is an association of Haemonculi and their creations, a power block of the flesh crafters, holding its own place in the shadowed politics of the Dark City. The Covens are the third great power of Commorragh, standing alongside the Kabals and the Wych Cults, wielding the immense influence that their craft and their power to raise the dead afford them. Through the Covens, the Haemonculi take their place among the powers of the Dark City, and the power of the Covens is subtle and deep. They do not command the fleets of the Kabals or the arenas of the Wych Cults, but they hold something that both need, the fleshcraft that heals and resurrects, the drugs and horrors and creations that the Dark City requires. Everyone in Commorragh needs the Haemonculi, whether for resurrection, for healing, for the combat drugs of the Wyches, for the horrors that fill the arenas and the raids. And so the Covens wield a hidden power over the whole Dark City, a leverage born of the fact that all must come to them for the fruits of their craft. The Haemonculi are the quiet power behind the Dark City, the flesh crafters that all must reckon with. The Haemonculi also create the horrors that serve the Dark Eldar in war and in the arena. From the raw material of captives and slaves, they craft grotesque creations. The Raks, remade slaves who serve the Covens. The grotesques, mindless flesh horrors of great strength. The pain engines, terrible constructs that harvest suffering on the battlefield. These creations are the servants and weapons of the Covens, the horrors sculpted from flesh by the masters of the craft. Through their creations, the Haemonculi bring their fleshcraft to the battlefield and the arena, the horrors of the depths made manifest in the wars and spectacles of the Dark City. The pain engines are among the most terrible of these creations, constructs of metal and flesh that serve the Covens in battle. Some drink in the suffering of the dying and channel it to the Dark Eldar around them, harvesting anguish on the battlefield as the arena harvests it in Commorragh. Others are engines of destruction, wading through battle to deal death and gather the suffering of the slain. These pain engines embody the union of the Haemonculi's fleshcraft and dark technology, terrible constructs that serve the Covens in war, harvesting the suffering that sustains the Dark Eldar, even amid the chaos of battle. They are the war horrors of the Haemonculi, the creations that carry the fleshcraft of the depths onto the battlefields of the galaxy. When the Covens go to war, they bring these horrors with them, a procession of remade slaves and flesh constructs and pain engines that embody the terror of the depths. A coven army is a nightmare made manifest, the creations of the Haemonculi marching to battle, the fleshcraft of the Dark City turned to war, and behind them come the Haemonculi themselves, ancient and terrible, directing their creations, working their craft upon the battlefield, harvesting the suffering of the slain. The covens bring the horror of the depths to the wars of the galaxy. The fleshcrafters and their creations are terror even among the terrors of the Dark Eldar. The Ancient Ones. The Haemonculi are among the oldest of all the Dark Eldar. Ancient beings who have dwelt in the depths since the earliest days of Commorragh. Of all the Dark Eldar, the Haemonculi are among the most ancient. Through their mastery of flesh, they have extended their own lives beyond even the deathlessness of their kind, remaking their bodies, escaping death through their own arts, enduring through ages beyond counting. Some among the Haemonculi are among the oldest Dark Eldar alive, ancient beings who have dwelt in the depths of Commorragh since the earliest days of the Dark City, witnesses to ages of its history. The Haemonculi are the ancient ones of the Dark City, the deep and enduring power of the depths. Their great age gives them a knowledge and a perspective beyond that of other Dark Eldar. Where an Archon or a succubus may rise and fall in the span of an age, the Haemonculi endure, watching the powers of the Dark City rise and fall around them, keeping their secrets and their craft through the long ages. They are the keepers of the deepest knowledge of the Dark Eldar, the masters of arts refined over uncounted centuries, the ancient beings who have seen the Dark City through age after age. Their age makes them patient, cunning, and deep, a power that endures where others rise and fall. Some among the Haemonculi have grown famous even beyond the Dark City, their names known across the galaxy for the horror of their craft. The greatest of them are masters of flesh, whose skill is spoken of with dread, ancient beings whose creations and cruelties have earned them a terrible renown. These master Haemonculi are among the most feared of all the Dark Eldar, their craft so advanced, their age so great, their cruelty so refined that they stand as legends of horror even among a people defined by cruelty. They are the pinnacle of the fleshcrafter's art, the ancient masters whose skill and cruelty have earned them a place among the most dreaded beings in the galaxy. And so, the Haemonculi are, in their way, the most enduring power of the Dark City. The Kabals rise and fall, the succubi reign and are replaced, but the Haemonculi endure in the depths, ancient and terrible, keeping their craft and their secrets through the ages. They are the deep foundation of the Dark City, the ancient masters of flesh, who dwell below all the shifting powers above, enduring through every rise and fall, keeping the secret of resurrection that all the Dark Eldar need. The Haemonculi are the oldest and deepest power of Commorragh, the ancient fleshcrafters who endure in the depths while the powers above them come and go. What became of the greatest of all the Archons, the supreme overlord of the Dark City, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow we sit with Asdrubael Vect and the Realspace raids, the master of Commorragh, and the terror of the galaxy. Sleep well. Tomorrow we sit with Asdrubael Vect, the supreme overlord of the Dark City, and the terror of the galaxy. Above all the Archons and Succubi and Haemonculi of the Dark City stands one being, Asdrubael Vect, the supreme overlord of Commorragh. Born a slave, he rose through cunning and murder to rule the whole Dark City, and he has held that rule for longer than most civilizations have existed. Tonight we sit with Vect, the master of Commorragh, and with the Realspace raids by which the Dark Eldar spread their terror across the galaxy. Tonight we sit with Asdrubael Vect, the supreme overlord of the Dark City and the terror of the galaxy. Tonight we sit with Asdrubael Vect, the supreme overlord of the Dark City and the terror of the galaxy. The slave who would rule. Asdrubael Vect, the supreme overlord of Commorragh, began his life as a lowly slave in the Dark City. The mightiest being in all of Commorragh began at the very bottom. Asdrubael Vect was born a slave, one of the lowly of the Dark City, with no power, no title, no place among the ruling nobility. He is said to be older than the fall itself, a being who was present when Slaanesh awakened, spared when the birth of the gods struck down those who would have sacrificed him. From this lowest of beginnings, Vect would rise to rule the whole Dark City, the slave who became the supreme overlord. In the earliest days, Commorragh was ruled by an ancient aristocracy, the old Dark Eldar noble houses who held power by birth and blood. A slave like Vect had no place among them, no path to power, no hope of rising in a society ruled by the ancient nobility. But Vect had ambition beyond measure and cunning to match, and he set himself to climb the ladder of the Dark City by any means, no matter how ruthless. Through deception, murder, and unmatched cunning, he began to carve a bloody path upward, rising through the ranks of Commorragh from the lowest of stations. Vect founded his own power block, the Kabal of the Black Heart, which would become the first true Kabal and the mightiest in all the Dark City. It was Vect and his followers who first called themselves the Dark Eldar, taking a new name for a new kind of power. And as his Kabal grew, Vect set his sights ever higher, dreaming of nothing less than the mastery of all Commorragh, the overthrow of the ancient nobility, and the rule of the whole Dark City. The slave had become an Archon, and the Archon dreamed of ruling the Dark City itself. There is a lesson in Vect's rise that the ancient nobles of Commorragh learned too late. They looked upon the low-born Vect with contempt, a mere slave, a nobody beneath their notice. By the time they acknowledged that this low-born Archon could pose a real threat, it was already too late, his power grown too great, his schemes too advanced to stop. The arrogance of the nobility, their contempt for the slave who rose against them, blinded them to the danger until it was upon them. Vect used their contempt as a weapon, growing his power in the shadows while the nobles dismissed him, until the moment came to strike. It is worth pausing on the strangeness of Vect's origin, for it shapes the whole character of his rule. He is said to have been present at the fall itself, a slave in the ancient Aeldari city, spared when the birth of Slaanesh struck down the pleasure cultists who would have sacrificed him. If this is true, Vect is one of the oldest living beings in the galaxy, a survivor of the fall who has endured through all the ages since, watching civilizations rise and fall while he schemed his way to power and held it. His vast age is the foundation of his cunning, 10,000 years and more of scheming and survival, a depth of experience that no rival can match. The slave who would rule became the ancient overlord, older than empires, cunning beyond measure, the deathless master of the Dark City. The masterstroke. Vect seized power over Commorragh through a single audacious scheme, using the Imperium of Man as an unwitting weapon against his rivals. The old noble houses of Commorragh stood in Vect's way, the ancient aristocracy that ruled the Dark City, and looked down upon the low-born Archon. To rule Commorragh, Vect would have to break the power of these noble houses, and he devised a scheme of breathtaking audacity to do it. Rather than wage open war against the nobles, which would have cost him dearly, Vect arranged for his enemies to be destroyed by another hand entirely, the hand of the Imperium of Man. Vect's scheme was a masterstroke of cunning. He arranged for an Imperial slave ship to be captured, and then allowed it to be tracked back to Commorragh, drawing the forces of the Imperium into a great assault upon the Dark City. When the Imperial invaders came, Vect ensured that their attack fell upon his rivals, the ancient noble houses, rather than upon his own Kabal. While the noble houses burned in the fires of the Imperial assault, Vect's Kabal of the Black Heart stood apart, preserved, intact, waiting for the moment to seize power. When the Imperial invasion had been repelled, Commorragh was changed forever. The ancient noble houses lay broken, their power shattered in the war Vect had engineered, while the Kabal of the Black Heart emerged as the only intact power in the Dark City. Into the vast power vacuum stepped Asdrubael Vect, seizing supreme power over Commorragh, replacing the ancient aristocracy with the rule of the Kabals. The slave had become the supreme overlord, the master of the whole Dark City, through a scheme so audacious that it turned the mightiest empire in the galaxy into an unwitting weapon against his own rivals. It was perhaps the most cunning political maneuver in all the history of the Dark City. Consider the sheer audacity of what Vect had done. He had taken the Imperium of Man, one of the mightiest powers in the galaxy, and turned it into a tool, an unwitting weapon aimed at his own rivals. He had arranged for his enemies to be destroyed not by his own hand, which would have cost him dearly and marked him as their killer, but by the hand of an outside power he had manipulated into striking just where he wished. And when the smoke cleared, it was Vect who stood triumphant, his rivals broken, his own forces intact, his path to power clear. It was a scheme of such cunning that it has few equals in all the dark history of Commorragh. This masterstroke tells us everything about the mind of Asdrubael Vect. He wins through cunning, manipulation, and the turning of his enemies' strength against themselves, rather than through open war. He sees further than his rivals, plans deeper, and moves them like pieces on a board, arranging their destruction while they never suspect his hand. In the capture of the slave ship and the burning of the noble houses, Vect showed the cunning that would make him the master of Commorragh, a mind so devious that some say it rivals the scheming of the gods themselves. This is the being who rules the Dark City, the slave who outwitted an empire and an aristocracy alike to seize the throne of Commorragh. The supreme overlord. Having seized power, Vect made himself the absolute master of Commorragh, and has held that rule for uncounted ages. Once Vect had seized power, he made his rule absolute. He ensured that all Commorragh knew that to stand against Asdrubael Vect meant certain death, and in the ages that followed, his grip upon the Dark City only tightened. He replaced the ancient aristocracy with the meritocracy of the Kabals, a new order in which power went to the cunning and the ruthless, with Vect and his Black Heart at the summit. The Kabal of the Black Heart became the mightiest power in Commorragh, and Vect its unquestioned master, the supreme overlord of the Dark City, and Vect has held that rule for an almost incomprehensible span of time, possibly older than the fall itself. He has ruled Commorragh for ages beyond the memory of most civilizations, surviving every scheme, every rival, every threat to his power. In a society where treachery is a way of life, where every Archon and Succubus and Haemonculi schemes endlessly for advancement, Vect has remained at the summit for longer than most empires have existed. His longevity alone is an achievement bordering on the impossible. a testament to a cunning that some say rivals the scheming of the gods themselves. Vect holds his power through a mastery of intrigue beyond that of any other Dark Eldar. He keeps his rivals divided, ensuring that the Kabals and Wych Cults and Covens are always competing against one another, rather than uniting against him. He grants favors and withdraws them, engineers crises to keep his subordinates off balance, and has made himself so essential to the workings of Commorragh that his removal would collapse the whole Dark City. His spies are everywhere, and little happens in Commorragh that Vect does not know. Through cunning, terror, and an unmatched grip on the workings of the Dark City, Vect has made his rule unassailable. The supreme overlord, whom none dare challenge in anything but their most private dreams. The stories of Vect's cunning are legendary, even among the Dark Eldar. It is said that when a rival Archon once stood in his way, Vect sent him a magnificent gift, an ornate casket laden with riches, an apparent gesture of peace. The delighted Archon opened the casket to inspect his prize, and found within it a far greater one, a miniature black hole held in a containment field, which failed the moment the casket was opened, destroying the Archon and his entire realm in an instant. Whether the tale is true or embellished, it captures the essence of Vect, a being who turns even a gift into a weapon, whose cunning knows no limit, whose enemies are destroyed by the very things they reach for. Such is the being who rules the Dark City. Vect is a schemer without equal, a survivor of ages, a mind so cunning that his rivals have learned to plot around his existence rather than against it, knowing that to challenge him openly is to invite destruction. He sits at the summit of the most treacherous society in the galaxy, a people of endless schemers, and he has held that summit longer than most civilizations have existed. Asdrubael Vect is the master of Commorragh, the slave who became a god-king of cruelty, the ancient and unassailable overlord of the Dark City and all its terrible works. The terror of the galaxy. From Commorragh, Vect and the Dark Eldar spread their terror across the galaxy through the Realspace raids. The power of Vect and the Kabal of the Black Heart rests in large part on their control of the Webway routes that lead out from Commorragh. The Black Heart commands many of the gateways through which the Dark Eldar reach the galaxy, and exacts a tithe of slaves and souls from the other Kabals who use them. Through this control of the ways out of the Dark City, Vect holds power over the raids of all Commorragh, the master of the routes by which the Dark Eldar reach their prey, and it is through these raids that the Dark Eldar spread their terror across the galaxy. From Commorragh, the Kabals strike out into the material world, falling upon the worlds of the galaxy with terrible speed, seizing captives and plunder, and vanishing back into the Webway before any defense can be mounted. Across the galaxy, worlds live in dread of the Dark Eldar raids, the sudden strikes that come without warning and leave only the missing and the dead. The Dark Eldar are a terror to the whole galaxy, raiders who can strike anywhere, take whom they please, and vanish without trace. The raids serve many purposes at once, and this is part of what makes them so relentless. They gather the captives whose suffering feeds the thirst, the slaves who fill the markets and the arenas, the plunder that enriches the Kabals. They bring glory and power to the Archons who lead them, strengthening their position in the endless struggle of the Dark City. And they serve the pleasure of the Dark Eldar, who delight in the terror and the killing and the taking, reveling in the raids as much as they profit from them. For all these reasons, the raids never cease, the Dark Eldar striking out endlessly into the galaxy, a predation without end that has continued for ages beyond counting. and no world is safe from them. Because the Dark Eldar strike from the Webway, emerging from hidden portals without warning, there is little defense against their raids. A world may be strong, well armed, ready for any ordinary foe, and still the Dark Eldar will emerge from nowhere, take their captives, and vanish before any real resistance can be mounted. Across the galaxy, from the worlds of the Imperium to the domains of every other race, the Dark Eldar raid at will, a terror that can strike anywhere and against which there is little guard. This is the shadow that Commorragh casts across the galaxy, the endless threat of the raids that come without warning from the hidden city in the Webway. For those taken in the raids, the fate that awaits is worse than death. Dragged back to Commorragh, the captives face the arenas, the flesh pits, the slow harvest of their suffering, a torment that may be prolonged for years by the arts of the Haemonculi. To be taken alive by the Dark Eldar is to be doomed to a fate of endless anguish, raw material for the terrible needs of the Dark City. This is the terror that Vect and the Dark Eldar spread across the galaxy, the dread of the raids that come without warning and carry their victims off to a doom worse than any death. From his throne in the Dark City, Vect presides over this endless harvest of suffering, the supreme overlord of a people who feed upon the anguish of the galaxy. What became of the Dark Eldar in the end, and the meaning of their endless damnation, is the story we turn to next. Tomorrow, in the final part, we sit with the eternal damnation of the Dark Eldar. Sleep well. Tomorrow, in the final part, we sit with the eternal damnation of the Dark Eldar and what their endless cruelty means. We have followed the Dark Eldar from the fall of their race to the depths of Commorragh, from the thirst that pursues them to the terrible remedy that sustains them, from the Kabals and the Wych Cults and the Haemonculi to the master of the Dark City himself. Tonight, in this final part, we sit with the meaning of it all, the eternal damnation of the Dark Eldar, a people who purchased immortality at the price of endless cruelty, and who are bound forever to the horror that both sustains and damns them. Tonight we sit with the eternal damnation of the Dark Eldar, and what their endless cruelty means. Tonight, in this final part, we sit with the eternal damnation of the Dark Eldar, and what their endless cruelty means. Immortality bought with screams. The Dark Eldar have one immortality, but it is an immortality purchased perpetually with the screams of others. The Dark Eldar are, in a sense, among the most fortunate beings in the galaxy. They do not age, do not sicken, do not die of the passing years. Fed on the suffering of others, they can live forever, holding back the thirst, renewing their vitality endlessly, enduring through ages beyond the span of any mortal race. They have achieved what many peoples have longed for: immortality, an escape from the death that claims all other beings. In this, the Dark Eldar have won a prize beyond price. But their immortality is a terrible thing, for it is purchased perpetually with the suffering of others. Every age of their endless lives must be paid for in the anguish of countless victims, the captives tormented in the arenas and the flesh pits, the worlds raided for slaves, the endless harvest of suffering that holds back the thirst. The Dark Eldar do not pay for their immortality once. They pay for it forever, in a perpetual stream of anguish that can never cease. To stop feeding is to begin to die, and so the cruelty can never end. The screams must never stop. The harvest of suffering must continue forever. This is the terrible bargain at the heart of the Dark Eldar existence. They have escaped death, but only by binding themselves to endless cruelty. only by making themselves into an eternal engine of suffering. Their immortality is real, but it is a prison, a deathless existence that demands the perpetual torment of others, a life that can be sustained only through endless horror. The Dark Eldar have won immortality, but they have won it at a price that damns them forever, an immortality purchased perpetually with the screams of the galaxy. Consider how this compares to the immortality that other beings have longed for. Many peoples across the galaxy and across all history have dreamed of escaping death, of living forever, of winning the immortality the Dark Eldar possess. But the immortality of the Dark Eldar is a warning of what such a prize might cost. Theirs is a deathless existence chained to endless cruelty, far from a blessed eternity of peace and plenty, a life that can be sustained only by the perpetual suffering of others. The Dark Eldar show that immortality, won at the wrong price, may be a curse far worse than death, an endless existence that demands an endless harvest of anguish, and there is no rest in it, no pause, no end. The Dark Eldar can never stop, never set down the burden of their cruelty, never cease the harvest that sustains them. Every day of their endless lives, somewhere captives must suffer, so that the Dark Eldar may live. The screams must rise so that the thirst may be held back. Their immortality is a machine that can never be switched off, a perpetual engine of suffering that must run forever, or the Dark Eldar will die. This is the true nature of their deathless existence, a sentence of endless cruelty more than a gift of endless life, an immortality that is also an unending damnation. The prison of endless life. For all their immortality, the Dark Eldar are trapped, bound forever to the cruelty that sustains them, unable to change, unable to escape. There is a deep irony in the immortality of the Dark Eldar, for their endless life has become a kind of prison. They cannot stop feeding on suffering, for to stop is to die. They cannot turn from their cruelty, for their cruelty is their survival. They are bound forever to the harvest of anguish, unable to change their nature, unable to escape the terrible remedy that sustains them. Their immortality is a trap, a deathless existence chained to endless cruelty, a life that can never be anything other than what it is. And their endless life has become jaded and hollow. Over the ages, the pleasures of the Dark Eldar have palled, their sensations dulled, their existence drained of meaning by its very endlessness. They seek ever greater extremes, ever crueler pleasures, ever more exquisite torments, chasing sensations that their endless lives have numbed. The immortality that should be a gift has become a curse of boredom and emptiness, an endless existence in which nothing satisfies, in which ever greater cruelties are needed to feel anything at all. The Dark Eldar have everything and feel nothing. Their deathless lives a hollow chase after sensations that forever elude them. This is the prison of endless life, the trap in which the Dark Eldar are caught. They cannot die, cannot change, cannot escape the cruelty that sustains them or the emptiness that haunts them. They are bound forever to the harvest of suffering, chained to an existence of endless cruelty and endless hollowness, unable to break free. Their immortality, won at such terrible cost, has become a prison without end, a deathless damnation from which there is no escape. The Dark Eldar are the prisoners of their own immortality, trapped forever in the cruelty and emptiness of their endless lives. There is a particular horror in the hollowness that haunts them, worth pausing on. The Dark Eldar have pursued sensation since before the fall, indulging every pleasure, chasing every experience, giving themselves over to the pursuit of feeling without limit. And where has it led them? To a deathless existence in which nothing satisfies, in which every pleasure has palled. in which ever greater cruelties are needed to feel anything at all. The endless pursuit of sensation has led to emptiness rather than fulfillment, the Dark Eldar chasing forever a satisfaction that recedes forever before them. Their whole existence is a testament to the futility of the path they chose, a warning written across the ages of what the endless pursuit of sensation brings in the end. And so, the Dark Eldar are caught in a double prison, the prison of their cruelty, which they cannot cease without dying, and the prison of their emptiness, which they cannot fill however they try. They must inflict suffering forever to survive, and yet the pleasures they wring from it satisfy them less and less, driving them to ever greater extremes in a chase that can never end. This is the deepest trap of their immortality, an endless existence of cruelty that brings ever less satisfaction, a deathless life that grows emptier with every age. The Dark Eldar are prisoners twice over, bound to a cruelty they cannot escape, and an emptiness they cannot fill, caught forever in the damnation of their endless lives. No walls hold them, and yet they are more trapped than any prisoner, for the bars of their cell are their own nature and their own choices, which they cannot or will not break. The damnation they chose. The deepest horror of the Dark Eldar is that they chose this fate, and choose it still, embracing the cruelty that damns them. When the fall came, the survivors of the Aeldari faced a choice. Some turned to discipline, guarding their souls against the thirst through restraint, as the Craftworld Aeldari did. Some fled to simpler lives, as the Exodites did. But the Dark Eldar chose otherwise. They embraced the cruelty, leaned into the depravity, chose to hold back the thirst through the endless torment of others rather than through discipline or restraint. The damnation of the Dark Eldar was a choice, the path they took when the fall gave them the freedom to choose, and they choose it still. For all the ages since the fall, the Dark Eldar have continued on their path of cruelty, embracing the horror of their existence, reveling in the suffering they cause. They do not merely endure their damnation. Many of them love it, delighting in the torment of others, taking pleasure in the cruelty that sustains them. The Dark Eldar have made their damnation their delight, embracing the horror of their existence, choosing again and again the path of cruelty over any other. Theirs is a damnation embraced rather than merely suffered, a horror chosen and cherished. This is what makes the Dark Eldar so uniquely terrible among the peoples of the galaxy. They are not damned against their will, not forced into cruelty by some external doom alone. They have chosen cruelty and embraced it, made it their way of life and their delight. Even now, when there may be other paths, when the possibility of escape from the thirst has arisen among the Aeldari, most of the Dark Eldar reject it, clinging to the cruelty they have chosen, unwilling to give up the horror that has become their nature. The deepest damnation of the Dark Eldar is that it is chosen, a horror embraced by those who could, perhaps, choose otherwise, and who choose cruelty still. It is worth dwelling on that possibility of escape, for it deepens the horror of their choice. In the later ages of the galaxy, a hope arose among the Aeldari, the stirring of a god of the dead, who might one day free the Aeldari souls from the hunger of Slaanesh, who might offer an escape from the doom that has hung over the whole race since the fall. For the Dark Eldar, this could be a path out of their damnation, a way to escape the thirst without the endless harvest of suffering. And yet most of them reject it, or take it up only for their own ends, unwilling to abandon the cruelty they have come to love. Offered a possible escape from their damnation, the Dark Eldar for the most part refuse it, choosing their cruelty over their salvation. there could be no clearer sign of how deep their fall has gone, that a people offered a way out of their doom would turn from it to cling to the horror they have made their home. This is the final and deepest truth of the Dark Eldar. Their damnation is a choice made and remade across the ages, rather than a fate imposed from without, a horror they embrace even when other paths appear. They are damned because they choose to be, cruel because they love cruelty, trapped in their horror because they will not give it up. The Dark Eldar are the authors of their own damnation, a people who chose the darkest path when the fall gave them the freedom to choose, and who choose it still, age after age, embracing the horror that both sustains and damns them. In this choice, endlessly renewed, lies the deepest damnation of the Dark Eldar. So assist what the Dark Eldar mean. So we come to the end, and to the meaning of the Dark Eldar, the darkest expression of a dark galaxy. The story of the Dark Eldar is, in the end, a story of damnation. It began with a race that indulged itself into catastrophe, birthing a god that devoured them. It continued with survivors who answered their doom with deeper cruelty rather than repentance, purchasing immortality through the endless suffering of others. And it endures in a people trapped forever in the horror they have chosen, deathless and hollow, bound to an eternal harvest of anguish, damned by their own nature and their own choices. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the Dark Eldar stand as perhaps its darkest expression. Other horrors of the galaxy are terrible, but the Dark Eldar are terrible in a particular way. A people who feed upon suffering, who have made cruelty their sustenance and their delight, whose damnation springs from their own embrace of the horror as much as from any fate. They are the shadow that the beauty of the ancient Aeldari cast, the depravity that destroyed a race turned into a way of life, the darkest mirror of what a people can become. And yet there is a terrible poignancy in their story, for all its horror. The Dark Eldar were once the most beautiful and advanced of all the peoples of the galaxy, the masters of a mighty empire. And they have become this, deathless torturers, trapped in an endless cycle of cruelty, feeding forever on the suffering of others to hold back a god of their own making. Their damnation is the ruin of their ancient glory, the beauty of the Aeldari turned to horror, the mighty empire fallen into an eternal harvest of anguish. In the Dark Eldar we see what becomes of a people who indulge themselves into catastrophe and answer their doom with cruelty, a fall from glory into damnation that is among the darkest tales the galaxy holds. It is a story with the shape of a tragedy, a people who had everything and destroyed it, who were offered a path to redemption and chose instead the deeper dark, whose ancient beauty became a byword for horror across the stars. This has been the story of the Dark Eldar, the sadistic raiders of Commorragh. From the fall of the Aeldari and the birth of She Who Thirsts, through the thirst and the terrible remedy, through the dark city hidden in the Webway, through the Kabals and the Wych Cults and the Haemonculi, through the rule of Asdrubael Vect and the terror of the raids, to the eternal damnation of a people trapped forever in the cruelty they have chosen. They are the deathless torturers of the dark city, the darkest shadow of a dark galaxy, immortal and damned, feeding forever on the anguish of the stars, told slowly, for the quiet between waking and whatever waits in the dark. Good night, my dear friend.